Now, why does all that matter to cross-border working in particular? Well, the reason it matters is because these skills that add up to the thing we call coaching allow you to notice difference and allow you to notice similarity. And this is one of the critical things that happens when you're working cross-border. Actually, it happens when you're working with anybody, even in the same office. But today we're just focusing on the importance of it in cross-border working and how the pandemic, if you like, has brought our attention to this issue. Because there's been so much virtual working, so much working from home, we're noticing the differences that perhaps we didn't notice before. And the emphasis here is that the coaching skills will allow you to notice those differences in the moment, adjust your behaviors and how you work to be more successful, to work more successfully with other people, whether that's one-to-one or in groups. And I emphasize it's about noticing similarities as well as differences, because there will be many of those. But this is very different to the idea of cultural training. I just wanted to mention that just to illustrate the difference. Often when we think of sending someone overseas to work, so that version of cross-border working, we talk about giving them cultural training to understand the culture of the country or organization where they're going. That's very valuable, and yet it has a sort of inherent problem. And the problem is we're telling you about stereotypes. We're telling you what to look out for, as distinct to giving you the skills to help you look out for those differences, right? It's a different aspect. What these elements of coaching allows you to do is to build the awareness, build the skills that will help you notice what's different, what's the same. In which cases do people seem to work the same way as I work? Are they thinking the same way as I work? Are they thinking the same way as my colleagues work? It's that idea that we're trying to help people to notice. And that, as I say, is what coaching skills allow you to do. So Dinesh, can you move me to my next slide, please? Thanks. So on this slide, I've got a list of just half a dozen, five, I think, examples of these skills which added together create the idea of coaching. Coaching as used by a leader. Remember, that's really important. It's not about creating a professional coaching capability. It's about using these skills in your everyday work as you're working cross-border. We actually think, I say we because I'm referring to my co-author of Coaching on the Go and the business that we do together. We think from our research that there are 15 different elements that you can break down of the skills that apply for a coach in this leader environment or in this context of using coaching whilst as a leader. And here I've just got 5 of them. And I'm just going to pick out a couple of them to explain how they work and why this is allowing people to notice difference and similarities and therefore to improve how they can work with others, allowing them to adjust. You might also like to notice that there are similarities here to what Dinesh was describing earlier with his process. You know, that idea of knowing where you are currently, the audit step, the first step in his process, and then considering what changes are appropriate. And there's a similarity here. The skills allow you to notice these things and then to think about, well, what might I do differently? So of course, the first step is to develop these skills. These are in no particular order. I don't remember how I came up with them, but let me talk first about contracting. If you're not familiar with coaching, you might be thinking, what's Phil talking about? Well, by contracting, I don't mean the idea of signing legal contracts with each other. I don't mean employment contracts, nothing of that type. But what I mean does come from the same root. And the root is agreeing how we are going to work together. So when Dinesh and I have a call together, there are various steps we will take, sometimes without thought, that will illustrate and be acts of contracting. Doing that together helps us work out how to work effectively. And some of these are very, very straightforward. So for example, we might simply say, I might call Dinesh and say, have you got 5 minutes to spare? I need to have a chat. Asking him for 5 minutes is an example of contracting. I've said what I need from him. If Dinesh is sharp, particularly as he knows my enjoyment of talking, Dinesh will say, are you sure 5 minutes is enough, Phil? And I'll go, okay, no, you're right. I probably need 12 minutes. That again is an element of contracting. And then we might say, what is it that we're expecting? So I'll say, Dinesh, what I need from you today is some advice. Or I might say, actually, I just need you to listen to me. I just need you to help me with my thinking. Another form of contracting might be, when you get together for a meeting with a group of people, Simply agreeing what's the purpose of the meeting. Are we here to come up with ideas? Are we here to solve a problem? What is it we're here to do? What am I expecting from each person in the room? Have I got an agenda? What's the agenda for the day? Now, some of you will be thinking, Phil, that is extraordinarily obvious, move on. However, the extraordinary thing is, however obvious it may be, most people do not do what I just described. When we come and are involved in training people in coaching skills as leaders, this is often the most impactful issue because people realize it's straightforward and yet they do not do it. Well, they do not do it enough. There is so much more opportunity to do this. What is it we're trying to work, what are we trying to work on together? How are we expecting to do it? And those things may change during the conversation, of course, checking in. Think today in the virtual world, how many times have you been on a call or in a meeting, it's set for 30 minutes, and after 20 minutes, someone says, I'm sorry, I have to go, I've got a conflicting meeting. That's the perfect example of, if you'd contracted carefully at the beginning, you would have known that was going to happen. You'd have been forewarned that someone was going to leave early, just by checking in these basic things at the beginning. And then, as I say, it builds onto more complex things of, what do you expect from me in this meeting? Do you want me to challenge you really hard? Or do you want me to just listen and learn? What are the roles? So it's actually very powerful, very simple, but it requires practice. It requires you to remember to do it, and then it will have the greater impact. And of course, in doing that, it helps you to notice, again, this idea of difference and similarity. Because we probably have all come across situations where we started work with a new person for the first time, and their expectation of our relationship is different to one's own. In other words, maybe I expect to tell Dinesh what he's going to do for the week. I'm giving him a set of instructions as to what he's going to do. But Dinesh is used to being just told the outcome. How I go and do it is entirely up to me. It's a completely different way of working. But by having these conversations, we draw that out. We identify the difference, which allows us to adjust in whatever's the appropriate adjustment. In my example, I might say to Dinesh, sorry, but the right answer is I have to tell you what to do. And there might be some compliance reason why that's right. Because compliance, of course, is often by rules that we must follow. It's not a choice. There might be other circumstances where that's not the case, and I can realize that actually I'm better off giving Dinesh lots of freedom and he chooses what to do. So you can see how it allows us to understand these differences or similarities in how we work. Let me give you one more example before we come to a close. That's the listening or generative listening. So if you're familiar with coaching, you probably recognize that the role of listening is often talked about as important, as is the role of questioning, which is not on my list today, but is one of the skills. And again, some of you might be thinking, why is Phil talking about listening? I've known how to listen since I was a child. I've always been listening. Well, again, when we turn our attention to this and we practice, most people find that they are not effective listeners. Most people find that whilst they are listening, they are forming questions in their own heads and interrupting to address what they want to know, rather than what the other person is saying. Quite a different approach. Listening is a skill. Take a moment to think about, who do you know who you think of as a really good listener? Well, the fact that you have that idea of somebody shows you that there are different levels of listening, different capabilities of listening. And crucially here, when cross-border working, you can imagine that listening to people allows you to learn much more about what they think. It's not just what they are telling you, but why they are telling you it, how they came to that decision or that opinion. But all of these questions are important issues for you to understand, which is why spending time listening is so important when we're working with people coming from a different background and a different context. Oh, the slide has just changed, Dinesh, on the screen. I don't know what happened there. Do you want to click us back? No problem. We're back there. So yeah, that is why listening is an important skill. Now, it's an important skill in leadership, remember, that's what I'm saying as well, in your role, the everyday role, but we can all do this. There are lots of little techniques, and the reason we've written the Coaching on the Go book is just because it's actually quite easy, as long as you take time to do it and practice it. Well, I say it's quite easy. That's perhaps an overstatement. It's easy to realize how good you are and then to work at it. But the way of doing it, the way of practicing it is straightforward. And why do we call it generative listening? That's because if you're really good at it, not only will it help you become more aware and learn more, it'll help the person speaking understand as well, because they're given more time to think. They're given more time to express themselves, to share their thoughts, to realize that you're interested in those things. So they develop, and hence it generates greater thinking, greater insight. So it generates greater innovation, greater knowledge. So I hope with those two examples, I've illustrated this idea that, first of all, coaching is a combination of lots of smaller skills. So there are 5 on here. We think there are 15 in total. There are others. Each of these skills are valuable in and of themselves, and you can practice them, develop them on your own, irrespective of seniority. Logically, the better you are at them, the more opportunity there will be to become more senior, because you will simply become more effective. So when thinking of cross-border working, let's go to this final slide, and then I'll hand back to Dinesh. Thanks. The final slide is reinforcing this idea that when you know your employees are working cross-border, you need to be thinking about how do you enable them to do that? Do they have the skills to do that, or could they benefit from greater skills? With a relatively low touch of practice, which they can do on the go in the moment, they will improve those skills. That's a key part of our argument, that you can develop these at work. You don't have to go on a 1-week course. In fact, that's probably a bad idea, because you'll be in a different context, a different environment. Practice these things on the go, in the moment, whilst you're working, and you will gradually improve, because you will notice differences, and you will notice how you can adjust, and you will become more effective as an individual and as a team as well. And hence it's this idea of the win-win in cross-border working.